Hello, happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of The Practice. This show is a look into my digital art workflow. I'm Stuart. I'm a 3D artist, illustrator, designer, and your pal. And I'm psyched out of my mind to have you back again this week. Really exciting one this week. I think this will prove useful to a lot of folks. This is a feature in Cinema 4D that honestly I don't make enough use out of, and that is the Pose Morph Tag. This is an incredibly powerful little tool, especially when we're talking about character illustrations, but it could apply to a lot of situations. Really, anytime you're doing a series of movements, or in this instance we're going to be doing like point-based animation, and it allows you to blend things and create custom sliders for movements, and it's pretty fantastic. And what I'm also doing this episode is I'm going a little bit slower. Normally I take a couple hours worth of work and speed it into about 15 minutes, and this week I'm taking a little bit less time and expanding it from my usual 15 or so minutes to about 25 or so minutes here. So hopefully that's a speed that everyone can follow along with a little more closely and get plenty of. So first here, all we're doing rather simply is creating sort of a character model. Fairly basic character model here, and we're going to be using the subdivision surface to really add some smoothness to that. But here, what we're going to do is just create two little openings in this capsule for the legs. And I'm keeping this so simple. I'm not even going to model the arms. This character design is super simple. And to be honest, when I started this whole process, I didn't think about making it a Halloween themed image. I chose this sort of wacky, somewhat triangular shape for the character's head before I even realized that it looks a lot like a candy cane. So sometimes a little bit of kismet is great, and if an artist said they plan out every little thing and every little piece to you, they're probably lying. So sometimes you just gotta make the best of what inspiration sort of comes your way. So in any case, here we are just creating the subdivisions in the new surfaces we created underneath the feet here. We're gonna do a little bit of extruding to make the toes come out, create that little foot area. When you're doing character stuff, or really, any modeling where you want smoothness, but you're creating the forms custom, it's super helpful to just use a subdivision surface at first. And that way you can manipulate far fewer points and polygons, but still get a much smoother effect. So I'm just making some adjustments here, smoothing a few things out, keeping it fairly simple overall. If this model were any more complicated, I would probably think about using a symmetry object, because obviously this is a symmetrical character. But since he's rather simple and I'm not going to be doing too many modifications, I figured it was okay to just, make two selections before I made an alteration, basically. And kind of smoothing out the forms in the head. Using the soft selection option here to make some smoother alterations and transformations to the model. Double checking I have symmetrical selections. Things can get out of control rather quickly if you're not working with the symmetry object, or if you're, making inaccurate selections. Stuff can get dicey quick, but this is, pretty close. We're not going to add a ton more detail. I think we're going to add a little face to this cone shape up top, and that's going to be pretty much it. Then we get to dive into the really fun functionality of the Pose Morph Tag. So little eyes. And since the Pose Morph tag, as far as I'm aware, requires expanded objects like actual geometry and not primitives, I went ahead and just made these spheres editable and took out the back sides of them. The other thing I figure is that since the Pose Morph actually, and well, at least the way we're going to be using it today, the Pose Morph tag will be using the actual geometry of the object itself, and we have to create a single object out of all this geometry. It made sense to keep that geometry as low poly as possible. So now we're just doing a couple quick knife cuts to these polygons on the front of the face here and an extrusion, and we're creating a little mouth. Simple stuff. And now, soon we're really going to get into the Pose Morph tool. So you'll see that I'm expanding everything, throwing it all into this connect object and collapsing those things all together so that now we've got one single piece of geometry for the whole model. And now we're ready to add the Pose Morph tag. So if you go to character, Pose Morph, you add that tag, and it's really important to hit the points option on, to turn that on, because that's going to allow us to create point level animation and record that. So you see, I went in there and I added a pose named Smile. And then with Smile selected, what I did was I just made the alterations to the model itself. And you'll see then you create a slider which allows you to animate into and out of that smile pose. Really, really simple. And so I'm going to make another thing called Blink, another pose called Blink. And I'm just going to select the right eye, the left eye, well, his left, his right, our left, and I'm going to create a new pose, and I'm going to call that Blink Left, and I'm going to create a new pose and call that Blink Right. Then I'm going to select the right eye, and with Blink Right selected, I'm going to scale that down, and then you'll see now we have sliders for both eyes and a smile. And now you can create a ton of different point level modifications and record those into this Pose Morph tag and then adjust those positions and parameters just using sliders, which are keyframeable. And that is super, super useful, especially with facial expressions, because you'll see you can actually blend them as well. If you have both selected, or if you have both created, even if they occupy the same pieces of geometry in your model, you can turn them both up or down to varying degrees and mix the animations. And you'll see I create an animation shortly here, or I create a pose rather shortly here for a wide open mouth and wind up blending that with the smile in a way that's really, really nice. Now you'll see what happened here, unfortunately, is the first time I made the pose for the right foot, I hadn't created a new pose in the tag, and I wound up messing that up. So I had to undo it for a while and make sure that I had a new accurate pose created in the tag before I went ahead and modified that geometry to match. It can be slightly confusing to keep track of which one you've got selected and which modifications you're making. Then you'll see that once I've redone it, I have them both separate and I'm able to modify. Now the great thing too is you'll notice that in this tag there's the edit and the animate mode listed on top of your poses. And anytime you want to go back in, you'll see I probably do this in a little while here, anytime you want to go back in and change the look of one of your poses, you just need to go back to edit, select that pose, and then make that modification. So now I'm going to make a wide open mouth pose. And you'll see how I'm able to blend that with a smile in a way that's super useful and really quite smooth. It's amazing the way those two will blend, even though they're separate pieces of geometry position and scale. And so now I'm feeling pretty good about the sort of kit of parts I have, the types of poses that I have sliders for now. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time just texturing and lighting this guy, making it look good. And then we're going to get into some animation. We're going to create a simple little kind of scared, frightened, and shocked, but ultimately in good spirits character. So we're just throwing in some rough colors, some luminant textures. Just getting some simple render settings in place so we know what we're dealing with here. This looks pretty similar to my usual lighting setup. Using a globe light here and luminant textures. Put a little bit of luminance on these just to dial back the shadows to give us a little bit of a flatter look. You see I'm also turning down the reflectance a little bit, which gets rid of some of those specular highlights, going for sort of a flat, simple look here. I also turned the darkness down a lot on the slider in ambient occlusion. Now we're making a quick little cyclorama background. Really simple stuff here. Just take a 90-degree spline that we chamfer. We can throw that into a loft. Duplicate it so we have a little background. A little cyc background. Easy peasy. And at this point in the process, I hadn't yet realized that I wanted to do a candy cane character, or sorry, a candy corn character. I just had this idea for a low poly, simple kind of character that would be fun to use to illustrate some of the features of Pose Morph tool. I don't think that inspiration struck me till later. I am in sort of a Halloween kind of color palette already. That's probably helped influence my decision. So going even lighter here on the ambient occlusion just to soften up some of those shadows that we've got. Now that I'm feeling pretty good about the textures, it's time to start adding in some simple motion. And really, you could go a lot deeper with this than I wind up going. You see I'm just using the sliders and making some keyframes. Lifting and pulling things. I'm starting with the feet here. What I want is for them to be slightly offset in their timing. So that one goes up and comes down just a little bit before the other one does. I wound up, I think, making the mistake of animating both of these at once. And the second time I do it, I go through and do each foot individually, which made it a little easier for me. So that's looking okay. Also wind up doing a little bit of just a stretch and a scale on this guy. Just when he gets frightened at first, I wanted to exaggerate his proportions just a bit. So you see I just go up 5%, create that, and gives him a little bit of a jump, of a start. And see here I'm making the mistake of keyframing the wrong field. There we go, now I'm doing it right. I got really confused by that at first. I think that's whether you can turn on and off these poses in the Pose Morph tag. The one to the right, I think, affects the actual slider itself. And so now I wanted to make a little blink, but just like with the feet, I offset the timing of those just a little bit. So one eye would blink slightly before the other. And now you'll see here some of the power really of this Pose Morph tag is the ability to blend these sliders in their positions. So I wind up blending the smile and the mouth open. So the character winds up opening their mouth and then smiling while the mouth is still open, and then having that all drop down into a closed mouth. And you could get really deep. You could set up tons of sliders for different facial expressions. I think a lot of folks will have the left and right side of the mouth smile at different times, or on different sliders, so that way you can affect the left and right side of the mouth, really anything you could think of. It's really, really super powerful tool. And if you guys have any additional sort of pointers, or if you come up with something cool, if you use these sliders in a really creative or interesting way, I'd love to see it and hear more about it. So please share that in the comments below. Now we're really just tweaking and fine-tuning things here, figuring out exactly how I want these facial expressions to work. What's also great is you don't have to max these expressions out either. You can do half a smile, or the mouth just partially open. I've also, I've never done this on an episode of The Practice. Maybe I'll show this at some point. But I created a bunch of sliders for a mouth on a character once, and instead of having the lips sync up perfectly with how the mouth moved, I just kind of randomly keyframed the sliders of the mouth and created a really hilarious, animation of just the character's mouth flapping and opening and moving around really wildly. And it didn't look like proper lip syncing, but was a hilarious effect nonetheless. Tweaking the background colors and foreground colors a little bit here. I think this is right around the time when I start realizing that, hey, this guy's head kind of looks like a candy corn. Which are the grossest candies, by the way. Who out there even likes candy corn? Those things taste like sugary wax. I'm just modifying the timing of some of this stuff. It was feeling a little stiff and a little quick. I'm sort of blending and changing the position of a few things. Now, what I wish I had done, to be honest, was create a slider that modified the size and the position of the eyes. I think if I was going, I'm going for a little bit of like a startled expression on the character's face here in the beginning of the animation, and I think it would have been much stronger if the eyes got larger and sort of went up a little bit as the mouth opened. I think in hindsight, that is one of the shortcomings of this particular piece, if I am to be self-critical, which I am frequently. And now is exactly the time when it dawned on me that, hey, this looks kind of like a candy corn. What hadn't dawned on me at that point, however, was the exact colors and order of the stripes of the candy corn. So let's look that up quickly. And just adjusting those sliders, getting things close enough. It's looking like a candy corn at this point. Adding a bit of luminance so it matches the other stuff. And what I also realized is the inside of the mouth was still white. I didn't make quite the right selections there. So just make another solid orange color based on the gradient. And didn't quite get it. There we go. And there is our little candy corn, just in time for Halloween. I think the timing of the eyes, I think, works really well. While I didn't love the ultimate size of the eyes, I wish I'd increased those while I was doing these facial expressions. I am pleased with how they blink off time. I also decided that I wanted a little bit more of an exaggerated smile. So what's great about this is I didn't have to modify my keyframes. All I did was go in to the edit mode of the Pose Morph Tag and just go to the smile pose and make that bigger. And then it would automatically increase the size of the 100% scale in that slider of the mouth pose. That makes revising existing animations tremendously easy and is one of the most powerful things about the Pose Morph Tag, to be honest. And so let's set up some renderings. So now I've got the full 30 frames rendering out. I've selected a folder location to put those in, and with the magic of time-lapse, we're just going to skip all of that, go right to the end. I wish my normal renderings would kick out that quickly and I didn't have to do all 30 of them, but hey, take advantage of YouTube and its features while I can. So here we are in Photoshop, going to compile these frames into a GIF rather simply and easily, and do a little bit of color correction while we're at it. So I'll just make frames from layers, and all of a sudden we've got our little looping animation here. Really wanted this to be quite colorful and saturated, so I wanted really bumping up a lot of the saturation and hues in this a lot. Right now what I'm doing is I'm in the curves palette, just pushing a lot of reds into the shadows. I wanted everything to be warm in this piece. So you can see the shadowy areas now are getting some red pushed into them. It looks pretty nice. Turn that down just a little bit. I'm sort of softening the shadows and making them warmer. Typically, in almost all of my pieces, I like to make the shadows cool and blue. But with this piece, I decided to go in the opposite direction and really lean into the warm color range here. See, as much as I loved that background orange color, I was struggling with the fact that the mouth, the little opening in the mouth, became much less contrasty with these current settings, and I wanted to make sure that was nice and visible. So I spent a minute here really trying to find that right balance. So I love that background orange color, but you can't quite see the mouth enough. I thought, what if we animate the color difference? I tried that, but it wasn't working for me. Another quick tip is to remember that when you're modifying adjustment layers in Photoshop for a series of frames, make sure you're on frame 1 when you make those adjustments. Otherwise, they will only be applied to individual frames, and that can get a little bit frustrating. So now I think we're about ready. We're satisfied with the color range and the animation, and we're going to kick out animated GIF. There's the final piece. Nice and small for 30 frames, not a ton of colors. Weirdly, 128 colors yielded a smaller file size than 64, but whatever. So there we have it. Really pretty pleased with this one. Right on target for some festive Halloween times. If you like this video, please hit thumbs up and subscribe. If you have any further questions, don't hesitate to drop one in the comments below. Share with a friend if you found this to be useful at all. And if you want to keep up with me and the work that I'm doing, please hit me up at DLGNCE on Instagram and Twitter. And until next week, this is Stuart saying goodbye. Thanks a lot, gang. See ya.